Howdys and salutations, y'all. Sorry about the wait. I hope that you're having a good evening, morning, whatever time of day it is so far. And well, I'd say we'll jump right in here, but we both know that's not true. uh, yeah, sorry, it's been a long day, but that's a-okay because we get to stream now, which is genuinely, actually usually energizing. Except for days that go real wrong, like that terrible perspective course and some of the Blender moments. But that's okay too, because that's just part of it, and we're still on net positive by a long shot. Actually, part of the reason I'm tired is because I stayed up late yesterday. Not that late, actually considerably less late than on average for a Wednesday, but still too late. Researching possible social media management options to see if we can't start doing some actual, coordinated promotion and such. Figure that's probably we've sort of established a little more of a vibe, a little more of a groove. Although, trust me when I say we're still all over the place on content. A-okay by me. Two of the big things I would prioritize, well, beyond getting social media built out, we've got a home website, sort of. I haven't posted anything in ages because I really actually hate using social media. It's a bad experience. Especially now that, Twitter has gone the way of Facebook, and in addition to promoting just the worst content ever, which isn't new, they've dunked their APIs, so now you can't filter out their stupid garbage recommendations and such. And they are garbage because they all promote, let's not get on this rant right off the bat, engagement instead of entertainment. YouTube does it too, all the algorithms do. They promote engagement, good or bad. Which means that maybe it's engagement where they're excited about what you're doing. That's what you want. You want something that's exciting. You want something that's positive. But it's usually the more engaging thing is anger, outrage, or just like fury and hatred. So that's what gets to the top page. It's always just raging political, like, dumpster fires and like misinterpretations of articles, random outrages, and then occasionally a break where someone has managed to hack or figure out a loophole and promotes just random nonsense that's unrelated. Still bad, but at least it's different. Yeah, so I don't like going on either of those sites. I had to cut out most of my old meme sites between 2016 and 2022. Well, 21 really, because the politics, they went from memes with occasional politics to politics with occasional memes about politics. It was bad in 2016. It just reached a stinking nightmare in 2020. So iFunny and Imgur on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but same degrees of just completely horrible. Both out. I dropped 9gag before that, mostly because their web interface is so garbage, but it also started going more different directions. I tried literally memes.com for a while, which was wholesome for about a week, and then I realized that it seems to just alternate randomly promoting opposing political views and like social, cultural views, which isn't balanced and isn't non-political. It was just, I got lucky on the first week, I think. Or they don't show that stuff on day one because they don't want to scare everyone off because it's horrible and no one likes it. I'm sure some people do, but it's not a good time. Everyone talks about being drained and exhausted after social media. That's a thing anyway because it's just too much information at once and you're seeing stuff out of context. You might be seeing people at their best moments rather than equal comparisons. But once it got politics everywhere, that just got exponentially worse. And I've realized one important thing. I mean, I'd like to think I've realized more than one important thing, but in terms of navigating actually enjoying life, if you take a rest and you end that rest more like drained than you started, that's not a rest, that's just engagement. You were highly engaged with something, but probably not in a way that was actually meaningful, and usually in a way that's miserable. I like streaming because even on the worst ones, yeah, I come out of it tired, but I'm usually net zero. Like I come out where I went in. I'm not worse off. And most of the time I come out positive because we worked on creating things, or I've gotten to chat with cool folks like the people in chat. Or just, we've gone on a weird tangent and had a good time. Even just playing games, like it's a nice pause. But being able to talk with people while playing games takes it from kind of mindless sometimes to actually quite enjoyable. Ought to figure out some multiplayer stuff if we ever get more viewers. No biggie there, though. Because again, my first and foremost goal with this has been improving art, but it's also secretly been scheduling engagement that isn't miserable. It forces me to get off of YouTube, which YouTube stuff can be positive, except for stinking shorts, which are designed towards that even more aggressive attention-seeking and brain-draining nightmare. But I always found at the end of YouTube videos, if I watched like 2 videos, and I'm sure this goes back to the old Skinnerbox stuff, I wanted more, but I also felt fine or better than when I started. I was like, okay, we watched 1 or 2 things. It's been like 30 minutes maybe, although back when I started, the algorithm favored 5 minutes or less. That was the day. Not 30 seconds, but like enough to get in, actually focus on it, and then get out. I mean, maybe it's just nostalgia for when I was younger, but like, man, that was a sweet spot. 10 minutes got to be too much of a burden to binge them. 30 seconds, you don't even, like, honestly, I would have much less issue with streams if you had the forward and back arrows. Because so much of those, it's 60 seconds, and yet 40 seconds is wasted buildup. Like, let me see the stinking, you have a punchline that's worth like a 1/10 of a cent. Don't make me waste a whole cent on it. Anyway, streams was miserable. Their recommendations were very bad because they pushed engagement over enjoyment, as usual. So I've sort of fallen off favor with a lot of those, but I still want to be able to engage with people in an environment that's actually good, and I'd like to be able to get the word out there to communities that are interested in this stuff. I just wish there were better methods. And so that's why I'm looking for social media management tools, stuff where I can engage within like communities and see responses to me, but I don't have to deal with all of the nonsense getting shoved at me from the edge of the screen. Stingy Facebook's almost unusable. I mean, I'd argue it's been unusable for 5 years, and it's never been great. Actually, more than 5 years, because holy cow, Stinking 2016 was a long time ago. 10 years. It's been worthless for 10 years because it was worthless before that. But the interface is garbage, and I'd say 4 out of 5 things I see in the scroll on the rare time when I go on there are either promoted or recommended, which is usually just as bad as promoted. In fact, I don't know that there's a discernible difference other than one of them they paid for it, and the other one, the algorithm has decided to show you a thing, usually with malicious intent, I would say. At best, idiotic intent. And that's not the algorithm's fault, it's the people who made it and the people who run the company's ethics, which are just scummy from the start. But that's enough ranting about social media. Seek things that you actually enjoy. You could be tired at the end of it, but you shouldn't feel empty. You should feel tired from having done something, not tired with a void. I still don't quite have the words for it, but there's a distinct difference, and it's a subtle one, but it's an important one, because you can put in twice as much work and be twice as quote unquote tired feeling. But if it was something that was valuable, then the tired feeling is still going to feel good. You could put in barely any work, but be tired, and if it was hollow, it's still going to feel bad and feel worse, which is crazy. Or you can put in a ton of work and feel hollow if it's something that was bad, or fairly little and still feel good if it was actually worthwhile. The quality, the quantity, it's not like quantity is better or worse, it's just irrelevant. The quality is what matters. And engagement is not good quality. It's usually garbage. It's usually actively designed to make you feel worse, because people who feel worse engage more, at least with those types of sites. And that's excluding individuals who are preying on like folks who feel out of place or unrepresented, or like people don't care what they have to say. The number of groups that prey on like vulnerable groups or support groups, because those are people who are being vulnerable and looking for help, or like teenage groups because they're not more easily influenced, but they're looking for their place, which means they are open to options. And if the normal ones that they might have, or not even normal or traditional, but if other options that they had looked at didn't work out, or for whatever reason don't fit their views, or what have you, then these nefarious ones can present themselves as an alternative without making it clear that that is a bad alternative. It's real easy when you think stuff is broken to seek any alternative option, And this is true even when stuff genuinely is broken. When things are bad and not working, people want alternative solutions. They don't want to keep plugging away on something that doesn't work. That's perfectly reasonable. But stinking check your alternatives. Please. If you ever find yourself in the position where you're considering a change, or even a subtle one where you've shifted away from your old ideas and into new ones, that's good. That's perfectly fine. People change and grow. There's nothing wrong with that. But pay attention to where you're going. Because it's real easy to just casually accidentally slip into groups that don't have your best interests at heart. There's a lot of, especially on social media stuff, and I'm not even talking about governments, I just mean, like, for lack of a better word, political fandoms that are either far right or far left. And I'm talking, like, actual Nazi and, like, actual, like, pro Stalin style communism. Like, there are groups out there that act like, look at how inefficient everything is now, look at how miserable it is now. They pin the blame on usually the Jews for some reason, or whatever group is easy to target right now. It's almost always folks who are vulnerable because they can't argue against it or fight back. And then they're just like, check us out, we've got something that's simple and clean and efficient and works. And then they bring you in with that. And then they slowly drip feed all the other stuff until you don't realize it, but you've ended up in a real bad spot. And it's not entirely the fault of the people who end up on those paths. It's the fault of the people who manipulate them to get there. And it's stinking tragic. I'm not going to pretend that everything's great. There is not an easy solution, and if someone presents you a quick and easy solution, sometimes they're legit, but stinking give that thing more than an ounce of skepticism. Really look into it. Think about what impacts it has. And if they're rushing you to choose it, then be more hesitant. Because if there's a solution that is simple and easy, then you don't have to implement it immediately. You can take some time to think on it, make sure it's as good as it looks, and then when you implement it, it's simple and easy. So you're not out that much. There are times when rushing is needed, of course, but especially on social media, it's pretty much never. It's never. It's just not. I don't care how urgent or how bad the other political party looks. Be careful that you don't get so caught up in either being afraid or hostile to them that you end up in a worse pit trap of your own. Because it's stinking hard to climb out of those. I feel like I actually got lucky when I was younger with the random internet groups I ran into. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of potential drawbacks with any internet group. Even the most well-intentioned positive ones are going to have subsections that just have different ideas about what's reasonable. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes it's not. You just got to be careful with it. Crazy. When I was younger, the fandom I fell into, for better or for worse, was the old My Little Pony one back in the day, which at least ostensibly tried to be wholesome, and while it didn't always nail it, it was nice that there was some sense of shared attempt at positivity, because it meant that it was easier to shut down people who were being actively hostile with, y'all are clearly missing the entire point of this. And yet, even that group, regardless of discussions about some of the dubious art that has come out of it, even that group has a more serious problem of it attracted some people who don't necessarily have the same scale of sense of humor is the wrong word, but let's just say the writers got death threats over a very minor plot change in a children's TV show, and that's just not on a reasonable scale of response. I don't care if you don't actually ever intend to go through with the threats. No, don't do that. That's not acceptable. It's crazy to even think that. So even stuff that presents itself as innocent and tolerant and friendly, just be aware. And certainly stuff that presents itself as strong and macho and too tough for anything else, be very aware. Stinking careful for those. Because they've got a certain appeal to a certain audience that doesn't always... it's not inherently bad. There's plenty of perfectly reasonable things about being a manly guy, if that's what your thing is. But just be aware that it's not being used to cover up other problems. And likewise, there's perfectly fine things with not being manly at all if you're guy leaning. Like, you can go whatever you want. But also, don't fall so far down the rabbit hole that you become outwardly hostile to everything, because that's not really better. Anyway, none of my rants are what you're here to talk about today. As you can tell, I get I don't like the word rant, probably after the social media part. Philosophical feels too pretentious. I like to go into mind meanders and just talk about thoughts. And the more tired I am, the more likely I am to actually do that. And actually, for whatever reason, I feel like I convey it better when I'm tired. I think I overthink stuff when I'm fully awake. At least stuff like that. When I'm tired, I'm just like, the heck with it. Here's my thoughts. Here's my 2 cents. Take them or leave them. I really don't care if you do either way. But I hope it's at least interesting and entertaining, not engaging. If my 2 cents are making you mad, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. But also, I don't mean to say you have to leave, but I think you might have a better time elsewhere. Like, you're welcome to stay, but, like, I'm probably not going to be providing stuff that's... I mean, people are multifaceted. We may not come back to this topic for a long time, but I was thinking, if you're having a bad time, you've got a million options. I'm not saying you have to go, but why are you putting yourself through this? You know? You've got options. The internet's big. It's really big. Sometimes it seems too big, but there's lots of good things about that too. For all of the problems of the internet, it has done a lot of good. And there's no denying that. It's just also done a lot of bad. So we'll see. We shall see what happens with the internet, with the world, all of those big things, but also with this stream and promoting it and hopefully figuring out a way to engage with social media that isn't draining and awful. Or if it is, it's minor amounts and not eating up an hour every day, because I can't deal with that anymore. I used to put up with a lot of nonsense just browsing the internet, and I don't feel the need to anymore. And it's not that it was inherently bad, it's just that it wasn't really my cup of tea, and I don't know why I stuck around with some of it so long. But instead of continuing on that, how's about we take some look at the hair? Now this is definitely going to be more than one layer, no question. But it is also, without question, the thing we have the most reference for. Because we have all these wonderful view from behinds of Miquella that mean we can actually see what the heck is happening with their hair. Not thinking anything else. And head proportions are going to be a problem because hair is somewhat dependent on that. I'm just going to do face rough. Hold on, have I been... Yep, my stylus is still on the wrong width, but that's okay. We'll work on that. I thought I saved a reference for faces. Oh well. We can, at the very least, fix the pen problem. That'll be good. Then, just as a glance... I did! I just put it in the wrong place. Here, we'll pull this up. This was by someone named Pauline on ArtStation. It was just useful references for faces of different ages. It is also, I believe, in French, so I'll admit I can't fully read or understand it. Yeah, the proportions of the face of the child to the adult, I believe is what that says at the top. 2, 6, 25, 4, 12, 10 to 12, 20. I'm curious about the organization. Maybe it's just where they fit. In any case, there's something to work off of because proportionally younger heads are a little different. And so I'm not going to be mimicking that. I am just trying to get between that and we've got the Loomis book, so we've tried to get some proportions off of that. I want to get a face in here that is a reasonable facsimile of what we're actually supposed to be working with here. Okay, so first off, wrong angle, wrong color. Cool, much better. We're back to a normal pencil. Woohoo! Let's see. Assuming... Well, first off, I probably ought to clear out everything on this layer. Just in case any of it was still there. But actually, let's reset the eraser. Pardon my yawns. To vector, so that when we come back to it, we don't startle the heck out of ourselves. But right now, we do have a head that's going like this. We can keep it wide. Now it is tilted down, so we're actually probably dealing with something like that as opposed to directly at the top. But even so, we're still going to be probably looking for slightly squattier proportions than we would otherwise, which means we're probably going to want slightly lower than what we've got happening here. Oops, I may have just erased my entire line there, which was a mistake, but there's too many lines happening here. There we go, that one's in a good spot. Assuming we've got a top up there, we could put the eyes a little higher, or we could exaggerate the childness of having a shorter chin. Although proportion-wise, it's really the forehead that loses ground. The chin does get longer with age. So a shorter chin is fine, really. We've got that. We've got eyes there. I'm just going to do... I'm just doing super rough, because I want to know what the head looks like under here. When I'm trying to actually place other things that are supposed to be draped on said head. There we go. Ay, ay, ay. If we turn off all the other stuff, that's probably still too tall. I mean, okay, I'll be honest, I'm probably aiming for like 8 to 10 in terms of age, so we're not going for infant face. Interesting how the face seems to, proportionally anyway, start out very square. In the child years, it gets very tall, and then it proportionally gets wider again as you move towards adult. Definitely noticed that in myself. I wonder if that's true across, like, body types and genders and such. Don't know. Or I suppose not genders, but sexes. Can you say that on Twitch? It's a technical term. Actually, we don't need that line. Okay, first off, refresh. How's that look with the view? Uncomfortably childlike, uncomfortably slightly too large. Which is, I mean, probably correct. The head is going to be big compared to the body. And once we get the hair and such in there for composition, then that's going to be even more so. So let's, but it looks a little bit like it's still like it's an adult head on a, thinking adult head on a child, like just a small adult head, like you see in those old medieval paintings. It's not super ideal. Part of that may be cheek size. Part of that maybe we actually do want to go for a more narrow tall for this age range. Although again, looking at actual Miquella probably looks more like 6. I mean, especially based on the statue we looked at in the past. It's definitely not huge, so maybe chubby cheeks are the way to go. We'll definitely do additional tweak. Like I said, the actual face is going to be far and away the hardest part. That feels more right. That feels better. There's the back, I think. I mean, there's still stuff that'll have to be proper fixed, but this is at least something that is rough that we can work with. Okay, come on. Please. tapped it like 15 times. Okay, fine. We're just using the mouse. Input shifting. I mean, that's neat. Not what I'm trying to do. I did used to type on a German keyboard. That was fun. It's not that different from an American one. I still text on one, actually. My phone keyboard, I just left it in German years ago and never really set it back to English. Other than Y and Z flipping and then getting a couple extra umlauted letters to the right that change up the placement of like brackets and other doodads like that, it's really not that different. And it's much better if you're doing German homework than attempting to like copy and paste umlauted characters from the internet or find the key codes for them. Just switching your keyboard settings so that it types in German even if the key labels are slightly wrong, way easier. I do actually have a proper German keyboard that I have. But it's big and clunky and clanky and USB-A that I'm not even sure. Yeah, I can plug that in. But it's just a hair unwieldy. I got it at a place called Saturn, which was actually pretty fun. I also got a nice bag there that I still use. Okay. That was back, to put a date on when that happened, that was back when Nintendo Switches were super rare still. I mean, it was like a year out and they were still rare. Sort of like the PS5s are doing now. And so people would see them and I knew someone who just straight up, like, they were like, look, I know I'm studying abroad, but like, I am buying this now. I need this. I don't care if it's region locked. I have to have it, and they're the only place I've seen it. And they just straight up like packed a Nintendo Switch back, which is stinking wild to me. But hey, they were hard to find. Okay, now is where the fun part comes in. Turn composition way down, and we actually try to figure out how the hair is going to land on this. Now we've got one other reference image, of course. We got the front view first. And we've got the... that's the other thing, actually. Hold on. Somewhere fairly high up on the head, not eraser. There's the crown. We need to remember that. Seems to be well above the ears, and I do believe Miquella would have had it at this point. But we've got interesting curls happening in the front here. The hair is fairly low fidelity on the statue compared to some of the other parts. I mean, it's still like good for statue hair and good for 3D model of a background statue. I mean, yeah, it's a statue in a prominent place, but I wouldn't consider it a key game element. Given that it's a bonus zone with bonus characters, one of whom only technically shows up in the game. Okay. Now, seeing that without composition, it's going to be bad. It's kind of too flat to the head, and while that may be right for straight hair, the braids will sort of pick it up a little more, but B, it's not quite as fun. And not quite as imposing. The hair adds height. And I put that on the face rough for hair placement layer, didn't I? Yep. Well, that's fine. It's actually, assuming we don't worry too much about these two lines, especially because I think these head proportions are still a little squatty. I probably don't want them as guidelines anyway. I do like the face placement and the ear and the headband there. I know headband's not the right word for it, but would you prefer I call it tiara? Because I am ready and willing to do that. Okay, so we got the hair. Everything about this is, I mean, it's super braided, but there's also still some flowing hair even in the front, but most of this is going to be getting pulled off to the sides in braids. Including some that are probably going to be coming down around front. You can sort of even see as they dangle on this one. Which will, let me think about if you just moved back, it's the tail end of the hair that lags in that move. So it's going to be bent like this. But probably not like this, actually. This part is going to be there, and then it's just going to be getting pulled along for the ride. Let's see, assuming this other one, if you had moved back, probably is going to get caught in the arm, actually. But I don't want it to mess with the silhouette too much. We've talked a lot about that. So even if it's caught in the arm, we'll just say it's kind of bunched up and still, like, it may be like this, so it sort of follows the flows of this fabric. We'll use color and various things to make sure that it stands out compared to the rest. And so that it's visible, we'll make sure that it pokes out a little bit, but we generally don't want it to be breaking the flow of this too much. So we'll try to angle it in a way that fits the rest of that well. Okay. And we can probably make those longer, but this is just a start. We'll say weight. Still got a little weight there. Okay. Fairly sizable chunk. But we're also going to have bigger braids, especially visible around back here. And I kind of like the idea of the whole chunk of hair also being back there a little more. We'll check the back view of the statue to see, but at the very least there are sizable braids coming from here and from over here. And there appears to be one in the middle, but it may form from other ones in the back. They've got a very complex braid going in here. And while braids are pleasantly simple to draw compared to other things, triple braids are slightly more complicated, and the physics of them is definitely different from unbraided hair. Okay. Looking at this view, I mean, that's just generally much shorter hair, which is actually interesting. It almost makes you wonder if Miquella is growing the hair out just so that its length is a representation of age, because the rest of Miquella doesn't. Like, if you look as a child the whole time, the only indicator that you'd been around a long time would be hair length. Interesting. Although, given the length of the war and the shattering and all that, and the fact that the Empyreans seem to stop aging at some point or other anyway, did Miquella just get unluckily early with that compared to everyone else? Or do they just all age extremely slowly? And, like, Radigan is actually much, much, much older than the others. I don't know. That's a question that I don't think the game has answered, and may continue to not answer. Let's see. How we doing? Probably going to add some free-flowing hair. It's still going to be wavy, but it's going to help us fill out this space a little bit. Although, because it's mostly straight, but there's actually curl in some of this hair. We go back to the Moog reference. Yeah, there's thinking a lot going on, because complicating this one is we've got the cocoon gunk that has been not fully cleaned. That hair's going to be pulled back pretty tightly, even as it forms the braid. I need to look at braided hair from the front references, truthfully. It's not a thing that I'll probably stream just in case, because you never know what turns up. How does braided hair look? Oh, well, I mean, a lot of these are wrapping the braids around the front as a sort of built-in headband, which is admittedly neat. I don't hate that. That's actually kind of clever. My hair's still not long enough to braid. Not really, which is a pain. One of these days, though, I'll grow it out, and then it'll be long enough, and that'll be fun. But we're a long way from being there yet. Let's see. So based on this, would Miquella's hair be considered half up, half down? Is that what you call that when you braid some but not all of your hair? Interesting. Front row braids. That's a good look. Not the right look for what we're doing. And it doesn't give us a good idea of how the braids actually look from the front. Waterfall braid, also neat. Also not what we need. What kills me is that so many of these stinking hair reference sites just look like they ripped off a bunch of images from Pinterest, which in turn ripped them off from stinking somewhere else. And like just threw captions on them, maybe even auto-generated captions. Some of them I'm sure are legit, but so many of them look really bad. Like the website, not the braids. They always pick like style images and whatever, but let's see. Hidden braid, neat. Braid. Oh, braiding with like a scarf in it. That's certainly something. Tell me what it looks like from the front, dagnabbit. Okay, we'll get to it. Oh, that's why they call it waterfall. That image at least makes more sense. And it's semi-front view, and we might be able to work with some of it. Okay. Let's clean up our front view of this hair a little bit. Got ourselves some nice outline going. And barring any other information, I'm going to put a part slightly to the left of middle. Makes it a little more dynamic. Should be interesting. Right, some of that's baked into the face ref. Cool. We can work with that. But it looks like it kind of goes up, not like up, but out in fans almost. Or you might think of these... No, I was going to say like a pine cone, but that's not quite apt. I'm trying to think of what I'm thinking of here. I'm just, again, roughing some stuff in so that we'll have it to work with, because as they say, it is easier to edit than it is to write, and you can't edit a blank page. That is true of art as well. Let's get some stuff started in here, and then we'll work on fixing it. We may end up tossing it entirely later, but it's at least a beginning on this quest. Alright. The other thing is what I'm going to try to do before we get too caught up in the where it actually attaches to the head, because that is a challenge in and of itself. I acknowledge that. I would like to figure out, knowing that we've got, looking at this reference, 3 main braids happening here. I mean, we got the 2 in the front. I'm not counting those. I'm talking about what are we actually looking at the back. And assuming symmetry, we should probably have 4. Because Miquella's facing away, so center of the head is actually going to be right between these 2 braids, really. So I'm assuming 4, which gives us, we've got this nice open braid on the side. we've got two tighter ones sort of in the top middle that merge. Or at the very least, they have a very interesting weave that essentially does a sort of that, where they feed into each other, which is fascinating. And then there's presumably a fourth one somewhere on the other side. We can see this one obviously comes down here, and this, what could be the center or could just be like the second of the two central ones, comes down here, and it's a big kind of chunky braid, which is interesting that they're not all symmetrical. That's kind of a neat twist. Not like a hairstyling twist, but just I wonder, is that the implication that it's self-braided or amateurly done? Or like, what's the dynamic there? Or is it just medieval braid hard? Who knows? But I'm going to presuppose there's not a ton of evidence for more than those two making it to the back. Is this one really just like a... Actually, that one kind of is that round the front braid that I'd been looking at earlier. And if there's two of those that sort of merge into this big knot and get braided in with this mess, then there's only two major threads happening there, which is interesting. Now again, we want to make sure that our lines are not in any way undercutting the pose here. So this hair is going to probably, as much as hair is an important part of Miquella, and I actually want it to be something of a focal point, I need to make sure that it's not making this stuff vague. And unfortunately, with the light outfit and the light hair, we're going to have to be careful with that. Fortunately, because of our lighting angle, the hair is probably going to be far more illuminated than the outfit, which gives us something to differentiate with. Assuming braids, we could probably have one of them visible back here. And then we could have the other one. I mean, they're heavy, so they're not going to swing a ton, even with like all of this. And that's hardly satisfying or accurate feeling, actually. So let's just dunk all of that nonsense. Got some pulled back. We've got that loose triple braid kind of happening around. And we'll have sort of the two big ones that these feed into. Which will probably just come out of that, and then we'll have the loose hair. The problem is I know these braids are extremely long. You could really have this have been sort of like a whipping around pose. And then the hair is like almost pointing into this and accentuating it. That's like a lot of whipping around. Whoops, that's the XP pen. Need to come up with a better name for that. And they look like they're too attached when it's like this. Okay. It's a start. I think a start is about as far as I'm going to get before I vote to take my pause. We'll take a quick little break in here. And then, I know it's a little early, but like I said, I can tell that I'm not super energetic today, so I'm going to do what I can, make some tangible progress, because that always feels good. Even if yesterday's or Tuesday's progress wasn't a ton, it was still something, and it let us move on. Today, even if we're, this is still real rough, but we're actually a lot closer than the Crystallian-looking hair that we were at. And we've got something of a face shape started, which we will have to tweak. But yeah, no, we're making headway, and I'm fine with making headway. So we'll take a few minutes, and then when we come back, we will attempt to make more headway. See y'all on the flip side. Howdys and salutations, y'all! Thank you for waiting. We are back at it. Now, one thing I did remember over the break is that I probably am going to have to wrap somewhat early today anyway, because I've got some other things to wrap, specifically presents for someone. So I need to get that. I'm going to have to wrap a little early so I can get that done. So please just bear with me for that. Knowing that, and knowing how tired I am, though, I figure we've sort of been doing compositional outline of where the hair should go and maybe how the front of the braid should look. I'm sure we'll tweak that part. But I do actually generally like the flow. I like the flow of the front hair a lot. I think that part's good. The back is going to need work, and the connection to the head is going to need work. We're coming down to the two hardest parts for this here. And given that I am clearly not in any shape to make decisive decisions on any of that, what I'm going to propose instead is that we take a moment. That's not how you spell that, but whatever. We're going to take a moment, and we are just going to do some braid practice. How about that? Because basic braid's not that hard. There was something going around on social media a while back, but also just as a hairstyle, they're comparably easier than some other ones because they have tangible edges and very clear borders, which for me at least makes them easier. I'm sure not everyone agrees. But for me, I'm like, yes, I can represent the hair with lines and it looks like hair. Yes. I mean, heck, you can, if you're just trying to do placement and stuff, you can even get a decent facsimile just with a series of increasingly small X's that sort of turn into just each side of the X alternating. However, I do think that we're going to be wanting a little more than that. So let's actually look at some of these. First off, I can give you abstract braid advice, but this is a triple braid, which will make it slightly more complicated. Although that's not an uncommon braid, it's just, you know, it does sort of undercut the draw intersecting letter T's like this, where you've got like a letter T and then a letter T and then a letter T. They're sideways, but doing that. And if you curve them up a little bit, up as in towards the head. So if you've got the braid, like if it's a funky angle and the person's like in the top of the frame and the braid is dangling down, then the point towards that. If they're like falling out of frame and the braid is up, then it's technically going to be pointing just towards their head, wherever that is. So the head would be down that way. But in this case, you can essentially do this sort of interlocking. There's a ton of names for what this pattern's actually called. And we'll just make it get smaller. And then all you need to do, once you've sort of got your interlocking pattern in there, is just curve it. And curve it. And curve it. And curve it. Curve. Curve it out and away from where the pattern is. Easy enough, really. This little intersection here is kind of rough. Maybe that's got like... I don't know why you'd put a scrunchie on a braid, but you know, you do you, nameless hair owner who doesn't exist. And if you want to get like loose hair at the end, you can always do like kind of the curl back, which isn't like, and this probably works better for less braided hair, but you can also use it as the endpoint for braided hair. It's sort of converging like this, and it kind of curls like that, and then you do just like an under curve. Or like if they've got curly hair, then this works better, because it actually just looks like it's curling around on itself. Not that good of a trick in this case, so I'm not going to mess with it too much. Yeah. I mean, that one's fairly sloppy, but even then it's recognizable as a braid. Now, the other thing we can do is actually look in here at this illustration and look at how they've done it, because there's three things happening here. There's what I would call, incorrectly by the way, I would incorrectly call this like a normal traditional braid or whatever. It's got the three interlocking ones. You can also do these as a series of triangles, but it will look choppier. Because you have to line up the edge of one with the base of another every time. and triangle lines up with that. And it ultimately gets you the same interlocking pattern, but since this is more following the actual logic of the hair, I can see how it would help with some people. And it's easier if you're just like literally looking at it. You can be like, okay, I see those triangles in it. I get it. But we know how to do a facsimile of that, and when we're actually doing it, we can do a less terrible facsimile of it. I have done better braid art before. It's not... When I have energy and brain, it is easier. This one's also a triple braid, but it's much more loose and open. I'm not actually sure how, like, that would... I presume that would be difficult, because you've got to keep open space as you're weaving it. But it essentially means we've got 3 recognizable strands in here. We've got strand A. We've got strand B that it actually goes over. And then we've got strand C that they both go under. Strand C does this, and then strand C goes under strand B. And you end up with a sort of repeating sequence because this one emerges. So if we've got A, B, and C for the sort of sub-segment on the left here, then this essentially repeats because you now see we've got what was A, now B is going into that position. The one sort of swooping slightly was B, and it's actually now going to be A. And then C is going to come in from the top, and it's going to be emerging as A. Did I say that right? I don't think I said that right. Hold on. C becomes B. Okay, so it's... Actually, this would be L prime, which is unhelpful. Right. A goes to C. B goes to A. And C goes to B. And that's how it is. So this is pointing too far up, truthfully. This one should be pointing more on that open. We've got C coming back in, and then A is coming back in on the top. It's going to go over this one and under this next one, and we're going to repeat. This one now becoming going to there. This one now continuing over. And this one coming in from the bottom. So now C has moved in to the position of A from the start. Once we get into this third iteration. I mean, they're all going to move into the one that they weren't at. So A goes to C, C goes to A. But it's essentially, it's going to keep repeating that as we go through it. Now, it's complicated in here. We can draw it better if we just do the simple lines and how they're supposed to interact first. And this is something that we could even do smaller and have follow like a contour of the head or the gravity. So we can try that. Got A. Doing its thing. And they're fairly wide loops. I'm probably getting these too tense, but that's okay for demo. That one's A. This one's going to be B. By the time it hits A again, we'll be here. And then C is this one that comes under and emerges through the loop. And I've done a bad job of this already, due to a lack of good proportions on it. I mean, one iteration is not hard to do. But the challenge with it being lines is that it is easy to lose track of where which one's above and below. So it just looks like a crazy swirl with a DNA. Like a normal DNA and then one nonsense one. But that's not what it actually is, of course. Because your brain looks at this and you want to interpret 2 strands here. Like at first glance, you see, oh, we've got alternating up and down and up and down and up and down. But you don't realize that this up is not the same thread as this one. Or even as that one. You don't get the same up until the 4th iteration. because it's really, this one's up, and then it's down for a while, and then up, and then down for a while. The next one is going to repeat that, but just moved over slightly. Up, and then down for a while. Up, and down for a while. And then the third one, once again, same deal. Up, down for a while. Up, down for a while. Truthfully, the downs are going to end up mirroring the ups in the curvature. But if you're just trying to get the placement of the strands, that's actually better. This one, this looser one is one that I am going to have to practice more, just because it is more complicated. But it helps to identify which thread is which as we're doing it. The third one is kind of, when I said there were three at the start, three types of braids kind of going on, ignoring the ones over the ears. Third one is this, it's not a full braid, but it's this funky intersection between braids. We're probably not going to see it on the piece that we're doing, which is good, because it's very unique, and I would really just have to find a reference for it, for how each of these is interacting. Because you've got multiple braids already that are weaving into each other. And figuring out where each strand goes, because they then emerge into different braids. So the strands that went into A aren't necessarily the strands that are coming out. They emerge in sort of two different sets. Which, again, we can sort of represent, but if we want this to actually look better, we'll need to think it through a little more. Well, again, just doing it with these abstract shapes in terms of getting placement down is actually not bad. Abstract triangles, when you don't overthink them, aren't bad. But look at me trying to train on braids when I've only done a little bit of practice myself. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert in any way, shape, or form. I feel like if I could actually figure out how to braid hair, it would make this easier to understand the layout and organization of a little bit. But what you gonna do? Again, you can get a decent facsimile with comparatively little effort. And if you really want to try to add those curves, you can. This one too. It won't look nearly as good. In fact, it'll probably make it obvious exactly how jarring it is, unless you're a little more clever with how you're placing them. And even then, this is still not good. Trying to do under the left side of the X and over the right side, better than just trying to catch the actual, doing this is going to fit this flow and rhythm of the, not rhythm, but the flow of the hair better than just trying to do side, 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 side. Well, even that's workable. But it loses a lot of depth that you don't necessarily have to lose if you're committing to more of a side view on it. Sort of just freeformed it down through that lower bit. I'm not going to deny it, but still generally trying to follow the pattern. And this, at least, this looks more believably like a side view of hair. Especially if we continue these up into it a little bit. Not the priority, though. So let's see, we're at 9:09 my time. I'm gonna be completely honest with y'all. I can feel the sleep, my eyelids are starting to droop. I am fading real quickly. I do think that this has been a beneficial stream. Unlike some other drowsy streams where I just completely lose it. And even last time's Nile stream felt like we did very little. I understand that. I feel kind of the same way, but that's okay. But I feel like this will get the hair outlined a little more. In fact, I may, just for the sake of visuals on it, not composition. Not again. But we can sort of try to outline some of the hair curls and wispiness and layers going into this. Just so that at a glance the silhouette is looking more accurate. Those shouldn't be parallel to each other, though, is the thing. That's what I'm trying to solve. That's something that I definitely won't be solving tonight, because it lands a little too close to composition for my brain to solve right this moment. But at the very least this way, we've got some idea of what we're looking at. I'm going to remove some of these inner ones, because I don't think they're helpful. And of course, we know we have these, although they don't show up so much on the silhouette itself. They're very much still there. And in fact, it can even help us define the edge of the face a little bit if we've got them looping in over the ears. Let's see, we don't want a tangent with the arm, but we'll figure something out. Got that a little more defined. I'm going to probably tone down the waviness on that just a little bit. And we'll figure out our little interlocking triangle front view. I'm gonna try to look up some actual refs and study those. We'll see how that goes, but hopefully it'll at least be helpful. Heck, maybe I'll try to figure out how to braid my own stinking hair. Then we'll get an actual primary resource, so to speak. Yeah, because like the positioning of this doesn't make any sense. As the braid, I mean. Like the braid should be coming out lower and more to the back anyway. Just throwing some lines on to indicate what these even are. Because it makes the arm vague. It's something that I'm going to have to be careful with. The silhouette down here is going to be a problem. But at least up top, I think we're getting something. I like the waviness. Let's, just to go back to it, because it is our, where did I stinking, there we go. It is our probably best actual face view. For all its weakness, we can get some features from it. It's less wavy. In fact, unbraided, so it's going to be a different hairstyle entirely. Dagnabbit. We can still play off of it, but we're going to have to be clever with it. But in any case, this at least gives us something a little more specific to work with than what we had before with the compositional hair. And it still mostly fills out the flow of that composition, which is what I was kind of worried about. It doesn't feel as big, although it'll probably feel better once we have a little more in front of the face here, because we've got a nasty hairline happening. That's not quite accurate either. It's too high up. We could even add a little more on there, although we'll see how that looks. Kind of excessive, honestly. But I did like the nice flow that it had. This is also going to force us to further solidify face alignment and positioning. Because if we want more hair on this side, then the face is going to be tilted a little more towards the center as opposed to one like away from us. Or we're still aiming somewhat away from us because we don't want front on view. We're trying to get some sort of 3/4 going. But it's just a note that if we want more hair on the side, the way to do that, other than literally growing more hair, is to rotate the head. Because you can have, head with hair equal on either side, or you can have hair on one side and more on the other, and it looks like it's more of a rotate. Looks like it's facing more. Or of course you can have hair back. That just looks like it's straight up facing that way. Obviously, they could also just be different hairstyles, but let's get that out of the way too. It's messing with my composition eyes. Not that my composition eyes are very great, but you know, it'll do. I think this was actually a big step for Groggy's stream. I'm pretty happy with it. And talking of engagement and excitement, I may be tired, but I feel like we've achieved something. But I also feel like I could try to keep pushing through more, and maybe we would get some more good stuff. But because I have other things I actually do need to wrap early for anyway, and I feel like the best solution to getting better streams in the future is getting better sleep now, I think that we're probably going to call it here for the night. So thank y'all. Thank y'all for poking your heads in, for dropping by. Come back to the next one. We're going to get way more in-depth on face and hair, even if I'm tired, just because there's not much else left to do. I saved it for the end anyway. I didn't mean to. That's my bad. Although hair is, even when it's frustrating, hair is so much more fun to draw. Face is scary. Faces can be fun to draw, but they're really easy to make look horribly awkward. And so I want to make sure that we got proper prep to do that well. And unfortunately, right now in my mental state, I don't think that I'm going to be doing much in the way of good prep. This is what I get for thinking I'd have a lot of energy after a Thursday. Not that Thursdays are inherently bad. They're just my exercise days now, right before stream, unfortunately. Not much I can do about it. When your schedule's beholden to meeting with other people, you got to sort of coordinate. So I'm not going to complain about that. Fitness is also important, and it's another one of those things that where it's a tired but mentally energized as opposed to tired but mentally empty. At least most of the time. And I think it's good. It's doing good work. But, man, I was so tired from yesterday already. So I apologize for that. That's on me. I need to sort out my sleep schedule so that I can make y'all some better streams. In any case, we'll try to do that next time. We got a weekend to catch up on stuff. So hopefully we will do that. Until then, I hope y'all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, exactly noon, 3 a.m., whenever it may be. And I hope that y'all have a good one. See y'all next time.